So we're going to do a little topo study and work on a oil container. So this thing is pretty complicated, this one anyways. Some of them are a little simpler, but there's a lot to learn when you practice on shapes like this because it's curvy, it's got some like little kind of somewhat sharp areas. It's a lot of fun, but it takes a little while. So first up, I'm just going to push that back and turn on opacity. So, and now I just create a cube. Think about like this shape overall, like what is this thing, right? A little bit of perspective in it from the image, but what is this shape, right? It's mostly something like this, nothing too special. And then, but the only thing we know for sure is the size here. We don't have dimensions. I don't have that kind of information on hand, so we can just kind of model off of this cylinder cap, right? And so now we have to figure out how we're going to make this thing actually do what we want it to do. Generally speaking, you're going to want to probably skew things quite heavily in a lot of different directions. You're going to use subdivision, at least a level 1. So hit Control 1, apply subdivision modifier. And this is what makes them so great for topo study because you're going to start to see a lot of just little weird things that happen. Hit E while doing some loop cuts here. And you're going to have to figure out what to do in these areas. It's quite, it can be quite challenging. So I'm going to use KC to do some knife cuts. Like we know this is going to do something like that, right? I don't know exactly what, but it's something like that. And this area here as well, you can see I'm just going to hit KC again. I know it's going to do something like this here, right? We're going to have two places that cut in. I'm not actually worried about just creating those areas just yet. Still need to figure out a lot of like the basic things going on here. So, and I need to get some topo ran to help support all that. So doing just knife cuts out and around and about this whole area. So I can have some edge flow going at least, hopefully. This one's going to want to run all the way through the shape. This one I'm going to run down to here. It won't necessarily need to continue to the bottom, but we'll do that for now. Like this here, obviously, you see the big n-gon here, so let's just bring that up. That'll help out. Okay. So as we just grab and pull these things around, you'll start to see like your shapes start to form relatively easily from this. So do some more knife cutting, KC. Almost like what I call creating templates. Sometimes you have to create what it is you think the topology is going to do, and then you can work out what it's actually doing later on. Right? So this is probably going to come down here. So let's not get too carried away yet. I want to do knife cut here, that knife cut here. Okay, we for sure know that this is kind of what we got going on now. Okay, and other little weird things are going to pop up though. So let's turn subdivision off in edit mode. Like right here, this little section, it's probably going to inset. So I'm just going to inset it real quick. Hit edge rail here, and you can change the depth too. Do things like that, right? We know it's not going to be this thick. It's going to be more like this. So we can go ahead and scale that down. You can see it's starting to take shape, right? Like it's not too bad. This happens a little bit quicker than you probably realize. But these particular shapes, they happen to just shift around quite a bit because it's, this is created through, I believe, vacuum molding, right? A vacuum mold. So a vacuum mold, it's just like usually a two-part mold, but sometimes they'll do only half of this object at a time, and then they'll do what's called plastic welding, and they'll get it all back into position the way they want it. But I want to kind of work these shapes out real quick. Get them going exactly how I want it. Do two loop cuts in here. So I know there's going to be a hole in here. And so this whole section, believe it or not, we don't really need it. We could delete it. And turn on vertex snapping. This is like the unsung hero of 3D modeling. Nobody talks about vertex snapping a whole lot, but you can just press E and extrude an edge and snap it all the way around. Merge it. I want 2 loop cuts across the middle, right? You see, it starts to take shape. We haven't collapsed nothing yet, so it's still a very basic SubD model. Not heavy poly or anything. Start to get it a little bit more into shape, perhaps. I'll align these to the left there with machine tools. These are probably going to mold into this area here somehow. We'll figure out what's going to happen with that. This just pokes out a little. Will that keep the right curvature? Probably not. Doesn't seem to want to anyways, so we're going to try to work it like this anyways for now. Let's see how that looks. It's not too bad. All right, this one comes forward more. These two can come forward more. Now you see when I'm moving, it's messing up that angle perhaps. You can always hit GG twice, go backwards, then hit Alt, pull them forward like that as well. That might be something you have to do. And it might not do it to every edge either. So that's unfortunate, but you can usually take these and align bottom, align right. And you can see where machine tools really helps out. So instead of typing SX0 or SSY or whatever, you can kind of go through this project a little bit quicker this way. I really need this to diverge somewhere over here. So I'm going to pull it straight up like that for now. But basically, I need this to come further forward like that. Should start to take that shape. Pull those up. You can see that's going okay. Okay, and that's not too bad. This one's going to be an extreme case, I think. We might have to fix it later, but this whole section here, we need an additional edge somewhere through here. Okay. We're doing more or less like an inset is what we're going to end up doing. And so let's see if we can't just work with this like this right here. If we inset all of that, you can see we have all kinds of additional edges now, right? Let's work it into position. I'm going to symmetrize real quick so everything's even again. Symmetrize with a mesh machine. You could use a mirror modifier if you wanted. This is going to get blown away in here. Don't need that. So delete it. You can start to see where that's all starting to come together now. I don't want to shift things too much, but we do need to have them evenly spaced as much as possible. The reason for this is because you could take these to an extraordinarily high level of detail. If you use all quads and you keep it very predictable as far as like the layout of the topology, so that it will subdivide not only extremely well, but you can potentially use it to sculpt later. Right? So you can see I just pull these around now. I'm going to probably collapse this in a little bit. But we need to make sure the shapes are all still intact as far as the main shapes go anyways. Okay, you can see that this here and this here, we're going to pull them in like this just a little bit. And it should, when it subdivides, gives us this, if we turn off optimal display, you'll see now we're thinking about what the end result of the subdivision is doing. We're trying to create this loop here. And right now, I think it's kind of a spiral maybe. No, it's technically a loop. Anyway, so that's what we're trying to do. We're thinking about how this is all going to join together later on, and how we can actually get that all to occur without having too many issues, right? Once you understand all that, like as you go through this process a few times, you'll start to get the hang of it, and it's not really a big deal after that point. Like right here, for example, we can see this is coming to this little point here. So this is like a diamond quad or quad triangle or whatever. Really don't need that, to be honest, in that particular area like that. So I'm going to cut this through here real quick. See if I can't collapse that a little bit into an E-pole, actually. Okay. That's going to give us a quad here. It's kind of hard to work both sides of the mesh at the same time, but I just keep symmetrizing it real quick. So if you're wondering what's going on there, it's happening. So this can be a loop cut right here. That's going to make that a quad. Pull that out a little bit. Okay, but this gives us basically even 3 on each side, right? So this turns into, if you were to grab this area, right, the cursor selected with C, you could do an inset, and we could pull it up, align to the top, scale it in. You can see what's going on here. Now we can kind of move that around as needed. There's a little bit of a curve in here. Let's see what it does when it subdivides. It's actually not too bad. But you can right-click this, Loop Tools, and click Circle. You see? And so you can actually do that, which is pretty cool. I need additional loop cut, though, right towards the top here. I'm going to line that bottom real quick just to make sure it kind of flattens out up here a little bit. Inset it there. Now that's nice and flat, right? So the cap we can do kind of separately. We don't have to make that all the same piece, basically. But yeah, the shape's starting to form out, which is good, right? Like, there's not a whole lot here that's wrong with this necessarily. I don't even know if we'll have to bring it to another subdivision level necessarily, but this I do know I want to join into this area. We have to prep the area, or we have to figure out what's going on, at least enough to the point that we can join it, right? So right now it's looking like we have a big face here, big face here. Oh, do those line up? Okay, that's not too bad. We got 2 here, 2. Okay, so yeah, this is ready to go, actually. We can just take this, Control J, join it. This has a face here, which we don't need. So I'm going to symmetrize, turn remove redundant center off. Otherwise, that'll mess up my cylinder shapes, potentially. Actually, sometimes having it off messes the cylinder, or on messes the cylinder shapes up. But anyways, so we got to go through this. This is going to be a fill. It's an N-gon for now. We'll fix the topo later if we need to. But all these areas basically need to be like this. Because I'm going to dissolve that center section. You can see what's going on over here now. Bam. Okay. And so this edge, we'll pull it in. Could pull this one around it as well. Looks like I forgot something in the center there. So we can just align it real quick. See how fast that goes, right? So alignment tool with machine tools. Excellent. Let's pull that one down. This was kind of the same deal up here, but I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm just going to grab these 2 areas, these 2 faces. Control E, bridges loops. That should work, maybe. Kind of. The only reason it's not really working is because the has the center line in it. We don't need none of this necessarily. I know I had them there, but I need them to go all the way around the shape, so I'm just going to dissolve them for now. Because it's not working out the way I thought it was going to. You can up-res and down-res things in weird ways sometimes. Like you could do, like, if you really wanted something like that strong, but then this is all soft, you might do like an inset, right? You see now you have additional holding edges, so that it does something like that. That's a possibility. I don't think we're going to do that, but I think this is actually mostly fine. Even if you subdivide it a lot, it doesn't look too bad. Shade it smooth, by the way. Subdivision like smooth shading, not shade auto smooth. All right, so round and round we go. Make that a little bit sharper there, perhaps. Plastics that are like this really work well with chamfers, believe it or not. It causes them to bow out a little bit, and it just looks a little bit more like melty or molded, kind of like a candle wax or plastic should look, I guess. So we can go around and do all that number. You can also shift some of these things around. Just adds a little bit of interest to it, right? You don't want to try to create, you're not a robot. You're not trying to create like a perfect robotic stuff right now, right? Like you're trying to make this still look like it's been used. Maybe it's been sitting in the garage. Maybe it's been, hot and cold multiple times in storage or something. And it's because of that, heat, hot and cold contracts and expands things. So it affects everything, whether it's plastic or it's concrete. It'll cause it to have these little kind of shapes that form or little cracks or whatever, just these little weird nuances. So see how that's working out. Now that handle, I guess that's a handle. That's the handle, I guess so. This top section anyways. I feel like this whole section at the top, all the way through here, could benefit going inwards a little. You can see it doesn't work with this front cap section. So this front cap section, we're going to go ahead and knife it up. Do this. Probably collapse one of these down like that. Whoops, maybe not. Let's not do that. Let's run a loop instead. So we have quads still. That'll work out better. But this gives us control at least, where we can kind of play around with that shape more now. Something like that, maybe. When we symmetrize it, it'll make more sense, I think. Yeah. And this area here is like really, it's kind of getting strong, I would say. Getting a little bit too strong, perhaps. In, I might want to shift things around a little bit. Like this front edge, for example, right here. Control V, smooth vertices. I'm gonna hit Shift R, do that a couple times. I'll round it out a little bit, but this one here also probably could smooth. There you go. So Control V to smooth vertices, right? Extremely useful. Those just happen to be pulling really far forward. I don't really like that personally. I think it looks kind of wrong, but let's slide these back. Straighten them out a bit. And do KC and knife cut. Maybe somewhere right there. So I can control that curve there. This one, you could probably just bevel it, to be honest. Probably work out mostly just fine. You might want to pull these back down a little. It's still going to be roughly the same kind of setup, but feel like a little bit different perhaps. And if you're not careful, yeah, you will end up with lumpy mesh. That's just something that happens. And I know this is not correct. It's moving in further than this. Like this whole area on this side right here, this whole segment. I found that a lot of these like oil cans like this, they do this a lot. They like to skew inwards at the top here. It can be a little bit challenging to do, right? I'm trying to match that skew inwards. So you have to kind of just play around with the arrangement here for a bit. See what might work or might not work for you. See, that wants to run all the way back down and through here. I'm not going to argue with that because I think having an extra edge in there wouldn't hurt it. But see what happens when it subdivides. It can cause, yeah, like that little warpy effect. So let's grab all this. Let's merge it all first, symmetrize it. Grab all of this here. Just press S and then X. We'll scale that in. We're going to try to eyeball this. It's really not the right answer, but I really want to eyeball it because I feel like I'm going to spend too much time trying to figure out how to do it the other way. So let's see, like we can pull some of these in at the top. Particularly like these places right here will probably go nuts in a second. You start doing stuff like this. Notice we still got an Ngon here. And we didn't finish that section out, actually. So if you ever see an Ngon and you're getting confused by it, well, you can collapse down and it's the side of it, but you can also cut them in half. You see, you can cut it in half, it turns it into quads, but this is a triangle. So let's do a merge down, merge out. That will be probably better, I think. Probably better, we don't know yet. See? Still just looks too thick to me. I'm gonna play around with that a little bit. Maybe it just bulges a little on the sides because it's got like oil in it. Oil's kind of heavy, right? So yeah, something like that maybe. So the whole idea of maintaining this loop here is I can add a loop cut in it, right? And that's how you get that sharper edge usually, is doing something like that. So it's not quite good the way it is right now, but let's say we take all this and maybe just flatten it inwards a little bit. Okay, and then these ones might even go towards the center more. These ones right here, right? You can see that's starting to get that kind of shape going, but because we have the loop, if we just go and loop cut all the way out to the side there and start scaling in, normally this works out pretty well. We just scale in a little bit, do another loop cut, and maybe take this one and dissolve it real quick, right? Sometimes you got to balance these things. They don't always just happen magically, but I was hoping that would behave a little bit different. It didn't actually behave the way I wanted. So when you scale, you can see it's not quite doing what I want. So let's do an inset, or we can do a loop cut actually. Yeah, we'll do a loop cut. Let's do Control V smooth vertices real quick. All of these, we still got to select all this. This area here. And this one. Smooth vertices real quick. The idea though is that you can take this section and somewhere in here you'll be able to scale it. Be very careful. Should be able to scale it. Nah, we're not gonna have all that. We're not gonna do that then. So instead what we'll do is we'll take this whole edge and we'll try scaling this instead so that it matches closer to the reference. I didn't expect to use this part to actually do this, but it was supposed to be like the control loop for it. And so, but you'll basically bevel this thing. You can change the shape to something a little bit stiffer perhaps. And you can see that's what we're looking for, right? It does that all the way to the middle. And so when you finally get towards the middle section, you can do like a bevel here, inset here, full control, inset. All right, and then you can do things like that if you needed to, but this particular one, I think I would inset and just hold control and let it do that number. That gives that impression of where it's like plastic welded together. And so that's kind of nice. You could probably do another loop cut there to make it a little bit sharper, perhaps. Sometimes things like that might help. They might not. So loop cut right up to the edge of it. You see, it's up to you. How detailed do you need it, right? How detailed do you need to go? But overall, I'd say this is mostly correct. Some things I might still tweak. It's not really that big of a deal. This little section here. I think it's too narrow. I'm just going to scale it out. And so getting everything 100% precise as well isn't likely going to happen. It's not usually the case. Okay. Subdivision, as much as I love it, it's really challenging to get it super detailed for things on certain areas. Like right here, for example, this little section in the middle. We might be able to get away with creating that shape, but honestly, this is one of those shapes that you're probably better off trying to just do in a normal map or using floaters even. But if you really had to, I guess you could come around and you could start. What I would probably do is use machine tools and turn on surface slide. You got to be in edit mode, go to the modes pie and turn on surface slide. Modes pie, um, when you're in edit mode, you'll see surface slide, but I'm using it as a quick favorite. So you can assign it to quick favorites and then turn modes pie off if you don't like the modes pie. But you can actually shift things around like this as well. So we can start to create like that control loop. And what surface slide does is it's basically a temporary shrink wrap modifier. You can see it actually says surface slide, but it's a shrink wrap icon. And so what's going on there is it just allows you to go through this shape like this. Okay. And so it's not changing the volume. Like you could take a vertex anywhere and move it, and you'll see like it stays in that area on the surface more or less, right? Like it's not going outwards. I'm just pressing G. I'm not doing nothing special. So that's extremely useful. It's called face constraint in other programs, and Blender never really had that. So you really want to go get machine tools just for that feature. Trust me. And this one here as well. Oh, I couldn't select. Oh, we have surface slide. I need to change that shape there real quick a little bit. We might use one more loop cut down the middle. Yeah. Always forget I leave it on though. So if you leave it on, it causes a lot of problems. Turn it off. Okay. Yeah, something like that will be okay. For good measure, let's just do a couple loop cuts in the middle of these guys. Um, there you go. Surface slide. Once again, because I'm just going to, shift things around if needed, as needed. Like right here would be a good place for a loop cut. I can just pull a corner up, pull this up, pull that up. All right, it's not a lot of edges here to work with in this back section, so it's going to be a little bit finicky perhaps, but we turn surface slide off now. We're prepping it just like we did the other piece, right? Except that's our control loop for the most part. So we can do a surface slide again. And hopefully we can contort some of this. And if you can't, you have to add edges. That's all there is to it. But you might also want to finish the surface slide and then redo it if you add loop cuts. Could be a thing, right? Let's finish it real quick, actually, and let's mirror it as well. Okay. We'll turn surface slide back on. So now we can just go through and hopefully work these little sections out real quick. Not have any issues because we're going to push all that in a second. This is our control loop, right? Got to balance them, all that fun stuff. We don't have edge we need over here. I really feel like this should just go all the way down though. And then instead, let's go K, C, and then go forward so we can dissolve those right there, right? I think that'll work out better for us. I'll turn surface slide back on just to make sure I don't mess anything up too bad. It won't do all the work for you. Like there'll be times that you think it's going to hold the shape for you, but it's not going to be able to. It'll give you little small surface distortions and stuff, but it's really not that bad usually. Not like usually you could kind of push them back into place if needed, but sometimes you have to do things like smooth vertices or whatever. This is going to be a little bit off here, but you can see what's going on. Let's turn it off. This whole section, I'm just going to Alt S and push it in. Actually, let's do a loop cut first. Let's Alt S now, push it in, inset, and there we go. So we have something like that. Now, is that a pretty big jump difference in there? I think that's a little much. So let's do, I think I Alt S too much. Let's do a little bit less and then inset it there. A little bit cleaner, I think. Some of this stuff's flattening out over here. if you didn't notice, because I'm adding loop cuts, right? It's supposed to be a curvy surface, but it's not so curvy looking anymore. Set flow add-on all day should fix most of these. So you could literally grab like strings of edges like this and then set flow on them. That should help you out quite a bit. And that add-on is extremely important in my opinion. You can just see it started working out pretty quick though. These areas. This one probably needs to be set flowed on that. Or maybe this one too. Not too bad. Gone through this shape so far. Not too bad. Sometimes I'll start with basic shapes, even more basic than this, and then I'll apply the first subdivision. I was planning on doing that on this one, but I didn't need it apparently. So the only other thing we have left to do is a cap. And honestly, the caps, there's different ways you can approach doing it. If you want to SubD model the whole cap, that's up to you. I almost always use floaters. I hardly, if ever, will subdivide the whole thing because it doesn't make much sense to me to do all that, right? These particular caps also, I've been noticing that they they really do want to be subdivided if with like the appropriate geometry. Like you can't just create a necessarily a good floater for these things, but you can still make a floater. I'll show you what I'm talking about. You'll see here in a second. It's just kind of gets a little bit weird. So I'm going to mark the top, mark the bottom here of that little section. I'm going to separate these. So Shift D, right click, P, separate selection, or that new object. And the reason is because the cap itself is pretty generic. It's not really too crazy here. So we can do something like maybe like that, and then maybe bevel these two. And we can bevel the bottom here. Bottom here, we can press ES, 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 done. So we're just extruding and scaling real quick, but you want to do something like that. So when you subdivide it, you can see this is the result you get. These faces like this are not a problem if they're flat, right? Usually it's not a big deal for high poly anyways. The big deal we're going to have is this section. And because this is one of those little weird areas where, first of all, you can see we're about lined up with the density of these little notches in the cap. So we'll be okay here, but I just want to show you kind of a really quick, dirty way of creating something like this. We're about even with the notches, right? But I want to do one more subdivision and have it like this, okay? And so we can isolate it for just a moment. But these notches go up to about, they go up to the top first of all, so let's do that. But we want to see where they stop at. All right, okay, so like right there. That's what we're looking for. All right, so whole thing, inset, whole control, or Alt-E, extrude faces along normals. You see when I inset, I don't get any back faces, so that's good. But basically, this whole thing is going to have like every other face here selected. So I'm going to do a checker deselect. This is probably the easiest way of doing this particular one. Then Alt-Shift click, and I can select like that. So if I just do like an inset and hold control, this is what we're going to get. When I subdivide this, this is what we get. Add a loop cut right here. Here. Now this isn't necessarily proper topology or anything like that, but it looks fine enough to bake from, in my opinion. And so if something really bothers you about this though, like these top sections here, you can always just try like maybe extruding it a little bit more, if that flattens it out the way you like or whatever. But this is more or less a floater, right? And to me, this is a lot easier to deal with than not having the floater at all, right? So this will bake into the normal map on this guy. If you, for whatever reason, wanted to have the little notch in it, right? The little sections here, you could still do that. You would have to select the ring inside there, inset, and just hold control and just put it somewhere close to that. Usually would work out just fine. And so then you could just, maybe take this little section and chamfer it, and maybe chamfer that. You'll have to chamfer it, unfortunately, but well, at least chamfer it, but you probably would like to use a bevel, to be honest. But now you can see the floater is pretty much right there. And I want to make it just big enough that it's outside of it. But yeah. So we could have increased the resolution of the SubD to get more tighter little pieces. That's just one way of doing it. There's a lot of other ways that you might have to handle that situation, where you might have to extrude that out a little as well. I feel like it needs to go right up to the base of these things for some reason. There might be times you want to just model like a little segment of the curved piece and then array it around as well, which is a pretty common modeling technique, but we're not going to do it in this one. And so, but overall, what's left? This little thing down here? Yeah. There's like a little notch up here, but we won't worry about that one. This one's easy. First of all, it helps if you straighten things out. We don't have nothing straightened out, so we'll work it. Here, you'll see. Okay. We're going to do an inset first, like we did on the other ones, basically. We could turn on surface slide. We can grab this edge here and pull it down, and this edge here and pull it up, this edge here and pull it left. You see what I'm saying? And because we're surface sliding, it's not a big deal. It should be just fun. All right. A little bit confusing what's going on here. If you're getting kind of distracted by the arrangement of the polygons or whatever the case, we're going to be doing, we can try to even these up basically, but we're going to be doing just an inset, right? That's it. That's all it is. It's not like some special loop. Inset's loop. Okay. You'll find that this happens a lot, where you can loop them like this, right? So if I wanted a curve here and a curve here, see? Turn the surface slide off real quick. This whole section. You go ahead and just Alt S, bring it in. This section here, I can bevel. This bottom one as well. I can go ahead and bevel. There you go. Thought that was going to be harder? Nah, it's not that hard. So let's symmetrize it one more time. Make sure it's all good. Let's forward slash. Some of this might have started getting weird in here. Sometimes you want to balance it out a little bit more because it was supposed to be a cylinder. You could try to run loop tools and circle on it again, right? But it might give you some weird results, so careful with that one. This one here as well, you don't necessarily need this quad topo like that. You could just do that whole number again if you wanted to. You could use the quads. It's easy to go between the two, generally speaking. You just grab the loop, Control F, and grid fill it, right? You might have to play with the offset and then span numbers and all that fun stuff too, so you can make it a little bit nicer. Right? Boom. Shade smooth, and we got a little bit of distortion going on right here. This might be from the ambient occlusion or the cavity map. Yeah. We bump up the subdivision count. Yeah, it goes away anyways. So that's from a cavity map. Anyways, yeah. So I think that's pretty much it. Like you can see what kind of work can go into this. It's pretty rough sometimes. But one last thing, as I did say, multi-resolution modifier. You can subdivide with this thing. You can go in a sculpt mode. If it's all perfect little quad topology and little perfect squares, you can sculpt on this no problems. And then you can use things like clay strips and turn down the strength and maybe even turn on a little bit of symmetry on X and just find that middle line and maybe nudge out like a, you might want to turn symmetry off actually for this, but you might want to just like nudge out like a little, you can subdivide it more here in this case, like that little seam that would go down the middle. And this is the kind of fidelity you can hit when you do good subdivision, right? You can work that even higher. We're at 1 million now. That's not too bad. But if you're going to do a normal map off of this thing, I want to forewarn you. Like sculpting it seems fun and like it'll work and it'll do everything for you, perhaps. The one thing I want to mention about this though is you need to hit close to 10 million faces per section of your object. So like this could be broken down into multiple meshes. Like not all of them will need 10 million, but like your main piece, probably at least go to 10 or if not higher. But you can see you can do that little plastic seam all the way down if you wanted to, right? And the best part is because this is multi-res, you can now use the multi-res displacement eraser. So you can turn the strength down on this and just kind of tone it back down a little bit and kind of erase it a little if you wanted to. So you can really make it look like it's wet or like that plastic welding is occurring, right? And that'll let you just go through and tweak this model a lot more than you probably thought you were going to at the start, right? That's great. So knock a little bit out there. Yep. That is a detail level that you just simply won't hit doing Boolean Ngon workflow, I think, unless you convert it to a mesh that you can also sculpt on. But you just, to me anyways, multi-res is the most performant version of sculpting in Blender. And that's the only way you're going to hit those like super high resolutions to be able to do stuff like this. Otherwise, you're going to have to try to find a way of getting around it with like a dynamic topology, or this just kind of gets weird anyways. So otherwise, you need ZBrush, obviously, right? So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will check you out in the next one. All right, take care.